Welcome to Prose Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Welcome to Prose Cons, a podcast for emerging writers by emerging writers, because sometimes we feel like prose and sometimes we feel like cons, which is particularly relevant to today's subject. I am your host today, Ali Burnham, and joining me today is Matan Elul.
Hi.
James Healy.
Hello.
Phoenix Raig.
Hi there.
And Alex Eldridge.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone.
Really trying to hit a different one.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I
feel like-
tried something new.
I also feel like I sound the same every week as well, so we'll have to mix it up. Today we are discussing. I phrased this topic as pressing the reset button on a project, but James phrased it a little bit better, which was returning to or restarting a project. Essentially, no matter how you reach it, we'll be discussing that moment when, during editing, a writing says, I believe in this project, something is here, but in its current form, this isn't it. It's not there yet, and what you decide to do next. But before we dive into that topic and pull it apart, I wanted to go around the group and ask everyone what they've been consuming. Books, TV, film, games. I'll throw it to you, James.
I think I was just saying before the podcast that I went to see The Whale recently. Quite dark, tense, sad, and confronting. So I think I don't know who the audience for that is. If you like sad films or if you like great acting, I guess. But it's a tough watch.
Yeah, no, I've kind of been scared of. I know it'll be great, but at the same time, I'm like, I haven't jumped out to go and see it yet because I'm I'm cultivating good mental health. Is the world compatible with that at this given time?
Good luck with that.
Phoenix, what have you been consuming?
Yeah, I've been all over the place. So last week we recorded our The Last of Us episode and stuff. And once we did that, I then went back over the last week and I rewatched 2 episodes with my parents and then proceeded to watch more episodes with my partner.
Wow.
She's almost caught up now.
Wow.
So I reconsumed that. We've watched a little bit of Dragon Ball Z Kai as well. Went back to that. I watched that already.
Nice.
Also, I wanted to throw out, this is the first time I've done this, but I'm in the market for a new anime because I've been doing a lot of rewatching of things and I'm trying to, some of my favorites are, I really love Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yep.
I really love Death Note. Those are some of the high ones for me. So anyone here or anyone listening, if you have any suggestions,
I'm having a deer in headlight moment where I know I've consumed so much anime, but I can't bring it all out at once for you.
Yeah.
It sounds like you like really character-driven shonen seems to be your thing.
Well, okay, to give you the flip side of that, one of my other favorites is I really got into a Fruits Basket on the far other end of the spectrum. I also love Slice of Life. K-On! Is one of my favorites, actually.
All right, fantastic.
I love Slice of Life anime.
I was not ready for the feelings Fruit Basket elicited in me as a 6-year-old. Like I just thought I'm gonna see some cool guys fight and get turned into animals, and boy, oh boy.
No.
I feel like I have a funny
questions.
relationship with Fruit Baskets because it's one of these ones where I consumed it many, many, many times without logic or reason. I just did. But also, I'm very resentful of the fact that for me, it was the wrong ship. I'm like, the wrong ship set sail. Yeah. Which could just ruin a story. But Phoenix,
we should
straight
do a
up.
podcast about.
I know, anime. We've got an anime episode in us,
That's a great
surely.
idea, yeah.
Go and
We
watch
do.
Spy Family is what I'm going to say to you, Phoenix. Just
Excellent.
It's current, that slice of life, but it's got shonen elements. It's super sweet and heartfelt. You'll love it. And for selfish reasons, I'll say go and watch Yuri on Ice because I need someone to talk to about Yuri on Ice.
Wait, okay.
Those are my
How do
two
you spell
recommendations.
Yuri?
Yuri.
I spelled it Euri. Okay, cool.
You'll get there eventually. Yep.
Yeah.
It's the ice skating one. It is fantastic. Everyone just go and watch it.
Awesome.
I'm not even going to sit here trying to sell it. It's every moment you're not watching it is wasted. Right. Now that's
and the other thing that I'm currently working through is I finally picked up Breath of the Wild and finally like feeling into it. I got really intimidated by the survival aspect and fell off board, and then I just recently picked it back up, and it's so rewarding. Oh my gosh. And Allie can't handle this.
Sorry, I had to mute for a coughing fit. All right.
Oh,
Are you okay?
I am. Thank you. All right. What have you been consuming, Alex?
I've been reading The Witches of Eastwick by John Updike, I think it is, which is like literary fiction, but also there's witches in it, and like one of them just like casts a thunderstorm at the beginning of it. It doesn't seem particularly scary or violent. It's more just almost like a slice of life sort of thing, but in like literary fiction form, which is very fun. It's very slow going at first when you do it. It's very like rich prose, so I had to kind of reconfigure my brain to be like, okay, it's going to be explaining for about a paragraph at a time and everything, but that's fine. And it is really beautifully written. Fiend, I think I'm going to another thing that I have been watching that is going to be my recommendation for you would be Chainsaw Man, which is a shonen that's very heavily character. It might be one of the most, maybe not the most, the most character like driven shonens I think I've watched. Me and Liz just binged that in the weekend when we were like, wow, where's season 2? And now I'm sad. But that would definitely be my recommendation.
Like prepare for it to be very dude centric in the way some anime can be. It
is. Yeah.
Like if you're a lot of, you can roll your eyes at anime being incredibly sexist, but once you get over that, then you have a really good time and there's great character stuff. But there's a bit of a deep breath with Chainsaw Man once you get over that hurdle.
Noted. This is so good.
Yeah, you could have a massive list. We'll just come back every week with more anime recommendations.
I'll write a report.
And Matan, what have you been consuming?
So I just kind of walked into a bookstore and picked up a YA fantasy. Sometimes I just try to pick a book I never heard about. I try not to read the reviews. I just try to see if the first page works for me. And I gotta say, it's a hit and miss for me, this habit, because sometimes I will just buy a book and on page 30 discover that I don't really like it. Jury is still out, but I've started reading Spellslinger by a guy named Sebastian de Castel, which I suspect is not his real name. So far pretty cool. I'm not gonna spoil it. I'll just say it's about a magical academy, and the main guy can't use any magic, and he's just an A-class bullshit maker. Like so far he's just like faking the shit out of all of his opponents. It's hilarious, really fast pace. So yeah, I'll keep you updated, but so far pretty good.
I adore those tropes, so hopefully it's keep me updated if it's good quality. All right. Well, circling to today's topic, I volunteered to host with this topic basically because I needed a therapy session and it was cheaper to have a podcast episode instead.
We're here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So off the back of what I'm consuming, it'll lead into it. I'm currently listening to 2 audiobooks that are rereads, books I've already consumed. English English Passengers by Matthew Neal, and I'm listening to The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss again. This is like my 4th time through, maybe even 5th. And
such a great narrator, it really is.
Yeah, no, the best narrator. Yeah, that guy. Anyone would be lucky to work with him.
Wow.
One day.
Yeah.
Plug.
Nathan actually went out to lunch with him the other day. It's fantastic. Just
Really?
hearing all these anecdotes while I'm listening to this audiobook again. Weird experience.
Whoa.
But there's a strategic there's a method to the madness re-listening to these books again, in that they're both first person retelling style. And I have wanted to consume this because I've decided to hit the reset button on my major project, Cypress. You've all probably heard me talk about Cypress a lot. It's my historical fiction. And I had originally written it in 3rd person. And after what feels like 2.5 years of editing, living with this story, working on it, maybe longer, I've had the idea for longer, but in terms of actually physically writing, I think it's maybe been 2.5 years. I reached this point where I was receiving consistent feedback that beta readers wanted more insight into the main character. They just wanted a few more thoughts from him. They wanted more feelings from him, almost just consistently throughout. They just like, do this, but everywhere. And then I would do a pass. I would insert more thoughts and feelings. I would blow up my word count doing this pass, and then I would edit it back, and then I would show it to a fresh beta reader, and I would keep getting the same note. So I felt a little bit like a hamster on a wheel, in that I'm doing the same thing and I'm not solving the problem. And this was getting to me a little bit. It was, I was in the depth of just struggling with the project until I kind of took a step back, and I'm like, what if there's actually an easy solution to this? One big stone that will kill the multiple birds, the little bits of feedback. And I'm like, changing this to first person, it would be a massive rewrite, but it would in one foul swoop solve this lack of access to thoughts and feelings, I think. And I was kind of titillated by this idea once I had it, and then I'm like, oh no, now I will have to explore it before I can leave it alone. And I've had a crack at experimenting with writing in first person. I think it was working. It was very funny sharing it with Nathan, because Nathan's been a big alpha reader cheerleader, and when I pitched it to him, I'm like, I'm considering rewriting the whole thing in first person. He was initially like, no, don't do it. And I'm like, I knew that would be your reaction. But now that he's reading what I'm doing, he's coming around. He's coming around slowly. So I'm right in the middle of this new experiment, pressing the reset button and seeing what's happening. And I am enjoying it again. It's given me this new kind of breath of energy. I think this is going to work. And I've always known it was a project that would succeed off the back of the main character. The main character, the audience connecting with the main character. When people think of the project, they need to think of the main character. And if putting it in first person solves this for me, then, maybe I've cracked it. I don't have all the answers yet, but that's just where I am with that. So I wanted to ask all of you if you've ever experienced anything similar with your own work, if there's ever been a moment where you've returned to something and done something drastic to it.
It's probably not as drastic, but very similar. I've been trying to chip away at a novel that I started in 2020. Then at some point I changed it to first person present tense, and I've gone back and I feel like the voice isn't working. So I've been trying to rewrite it first person past tense, just because, there's something about the present tense. The character is meant to be, he changes a lot, and I felt like it was written better when you had the character's voice, who he becomes at the end, recounting the details of what happened.
Yes.
Explaining his feelings at the time, but with his newfound knowledge, the voice was a lot stronger. Whereas I tried to change it to present tense to make who the character is at the beginning more relatable and empathetic. but then I felt
Mhm.
like I lost an awful lot of what made the story kind of stand out in terms of the voice. So I've gone back to and slogging through trying to rewrite it now with the two characters in mind, almost the character at the start of his arc and the character at the end of his arc.
That's fun how that's two different lenses. So did you say you started third and then went to first, or you started?
I think it was always first person.
Always first,
but
yeah.
it
Okay.
started
It's the
past tense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the character had all of this knowledge and all of this belief as he was recounting things from when he didn't believe, basically.
Mhm.
And then I went back and rewrote it to strip out all of that belief to try to show the character learning these things as it went on. And I just felt like it lost a lot of what made it interesting. It kind of got a little bit, there was something unique about having that almost the two perspectives, and you have a character going through something and the audience recognizes it, but then he's also got this, what I didn't realize at the time was blah, blah, blah. And it almost created I don't know what you call it when it kind of, the character starts to feel inaccessible, kind of put you at a distance from the character. So I decided to strip some of that out to make it more relatable. But then I think maybe it worked better that he was a little bit alienating. So I don't know. I'm working on
that. No, I love that juggle and kind of. So what I keep coming back to is trying to make sure I'm being led by my own taste, because it's in these big moments of questioning that I'm like, well, am I doing this just because I want to do something to it? Am I a little bit lost in the wilderness? And I have to keep coming back to, well, letting my personal taste and what I want to read and what I want to enjoy. If I'm enjoying it, then I'm like, surely I'm on the right path. Just to crack it a bit deeper, what you're saying, James, about the different lenses, lens for both, we're sharing this as a commonality, that this is what we're changing about our work. Is I've found a lot of the feedback I had on my third person draft was someone would say, oh, I like it better when we're in his head. I don't like the narrator's voice as much. And I'm sitting there being like, there is no narrator's voice. It's all the character's voice. What are you saying at me? And then in the third person, I was always trying to make sure, I'm like, no, there is no external narrator. It's always Will's voice. It's always Will's voice. And because I kept butting up against this, then I'm like, again, maybe first person will solve this for me. There will never be any confusion that there is an external narrator looking at this. And I do enjoy the retelling aspect as well, because I've never really had a crack at first person before. That's why this is so new and scary to me. And I had to make the decision, the distinction between a first person in the moment, as you're describing, James, and then the first person that is a retelling. It's the character's already at the end of their arc looking back. And I think I can lean into that because I'm working in historical fiction. And I think that's a fairly common trope of historical fiction, is that it is a retelling, a grand retelling. And both Name of the Wind and English Passengers do this. It's a sit down, I'm going to tell you a story.
But it kind of allows you to scatter hooks that otherwise you wouldn't be able to, by having this not just being a first person story, but a first person story being told by that person, like in world. Kind of allows you to, especially with the story, I don't want to spoil it for the people who are going to read it eventually, but in the case of Cyprus, there's a lot of things that happen that are not going to happen in this book, but are historically significant. When you do first person, because the narrator, third person, cannot just say, little did he know that years later he will. It breaks the immersion. Well, but first person can say, well, it could, but first person.
It depends if it's. Sorry, it depends if it's, and I was going to ask you this, Ali. Was it close third or omniscient third?
Very close third was what I was always trying for. I never liked the idea of a narrator's voice. That was never the intention. I'm like, it's always Will's third, but apparently I wasn't quite achieving that, because people were commenting on the narrator's voice, and I'm like, I need to kill the narrator. There is no narrator. eliminate the narrator.
I just wanted to comment that, Ali's being extremely positive about this, and she's looking at the positive of this, but this is a massive, it's like a huge undertaking. This is not something to take for granted. This is a done manuscript. It is done several times over. I've read this book twice. And it's just, this is not someone who's like 20,000 into the book. It's like, hey, maybe I'll just, kind of.
Mm.
So kudos to you, Ali, for the balls. Wow, you guys know I'm the self-proclaimed king of rewrites, but even for me, this makes me think like, wow, this is big. So yeah,
Well,
that's
thank you,
quite a journey to
Matan.
go on.
But that's
Yeah.
why I am
Hmm.
questioning my sanity, because I am a little bit at the, well, am I doing this for the right reasons? But before I bring us to the next question, I'll just chuck it to you, Phoenix. Have you experienced a similar rewrite experience?
Similar in the sense of rewriting, yes. Dissimilar in the scope of work, because it was not a novel. It was a 500 words children's book. So we're talking about the hardest part being letting it go, as opposed to the hardest part being the grind. But I just got to a point where I was getting a lot of different notes from a lot of different editors and agents and people, and everyone was liking it, but they were just like, they liked the imagination of it, they liked the voice, but they just like they got caught on these little details, and everyone had these different suggestions. And I was kind of trying to incorporate little pieces of everything to try to make like the super story that appeases every single person I've gotten feedback from.
Yeah.
And before long, it was like, this isn't my story anymore. Like I fell out of love with it. I was like, this isn't the story I wanted to tell. So like in the end, I had to be honest with like, I'm not having fun with this story anymore because it's no longer mine. So I scrapped virtually the entire thing, just full delete, and just rewrote the same story in a different way and saw like how it would come out again. And the result was one that I felt really good about. I really liked it. Still hasn't been picked up, and honestly it's like way on the back burner. I'm pushing different manuscripts right now, but I still love it. It's still back there. I might still go back to it. Actually, I probably will still go back to it. But
congratulations for being guided by your taste, in that there was a moment where you sensed you were taking too much editorial, because I feel like I get stuck in that loop a little bit as well. It's always this perfectionist drive to be like, no, I can incorporate every note, I can get this right. It's like a secret unlock condition that will appease everyone, and then I'll be able to sell it. I have another small sideways anecdote for Unsound. Was a little bit like this, but by the nature of Unsound and because of all the intersectional communities we were consulting with, no joke, I was probably receiving editorial notes from like 20 different people per draft. There was a lot of notes, and I was really receptive to the notes process, because I'm like, every note here is incredibly valid, and I need to do all these notes justice. And that's a script that, if you look at the first draft, so the shooting script, is unrecognizable. And I had to find a compass to which I somehow I could ground myself saying, is this the story I want to tell? Is this still the story? The themes, what's my touchstone? And for me, I landed on the lagoon scene. I know you lovelies have seen it, but just to remind you, that's the one where they go swimming, and there's a scene where Finn kind of balks and doesn't want to take his clothes off, and then they kind of have a healing conversation, then they go swimming while they're clothed. So that's the lagoon scene, and that was a scene that existed in draft 1. And I feel like when I wrote that scene, I'm kind of like, well, that's it. That's the theme. That's the tone. That's who these characters are. And that scene became everything else could change and pivot around it, as long as that scene was always there. And I was really big on fighting for that scene. So the character names were changing, plot was changing, but around the midpoint there was always this lagoon scene. And it kind of struck home for me as recently as 2 weeks ago. Someone watched Unsound for the first time, came up to me and said, you know what my favorite scene was? It was that the swimming scene. And I'm like, I feel like I could have told you that was going to be your favorite scene. You haven't surprised me with this information, because I always knew the movie was that scene. So it was kind of validating to be like, that my taste did manage to guide this structural decision. Thank God I'm not.
Nice.
And, you know, my taste must be worth something. And I feel like I'm questioning it a lot at the moment because of Cypress. So to have that moment of, no, I just find the thing that is the touchstone of the story. Everything else can pivot, but as long as you have a touchstone. With your rewrite Phoenix, did you have an equivalent touchstone when you pressed the reset button?
Yeah, it was like you saying touchstone. Like I kind of, it's almost like there's a thread that runs through it, and it's like that's the true story, and like everything around this little string can change, but this is like the soul of it. And so basically I was like, I'm going to strip everything around, like strip everything away and just like tell that string again and see what forms around it. It's like the seed of the story. And as long as I had that seed, I could like make any multiple iterations of the same story. But yeah, like the one for me was like, I guess there were always two characters. There were always two female characters, and they were the main characters. And then they were always, the horizon was always involved. Like the objective in terms of physically where they're going was the same, but like kind of how they went, how they got there, and exactly what they were doing there was flexible, and that is ultimately what changed. But the journey, the soul journey and soul objective was about the same.
Very cool. And I admire your ability to, now that you've found a version of it that feels like home, that you can comfortably put it in the drawer, even though, as you said, it's not out there. Because I think films trained me a little bit to be like, well, a thing's not done until it's out there. And I don't know if I'll ever have the confidence to be able to put something down and be like, it's down because it's done. Like I've found its finished product. I did want to throw it to Alex, because I know you're likely to have a counter perspective to this that I encourage you to share about finding and being happy with the finished product, and being able to move on.
Yeah. Well, I think my perspective on this is you can't please everyone. That would be if I were to sum up my take on it, that would be that. So the main thing for me would be, let me see. It's not a bad metaphor, Phoenix. You talking about like having the golden thread that goes through it. My usual take would be, and I don't really use a lot of beta readers, really. Like maybe 4 for a work, and I get all those things and have a look at them. And honestly, some comments I see there, I will just disregard. I'll be like, that's not for me, and I'll go through it. But what I'll do is I'll look at the different things that, because most comments, if we're really honest with ourselves, most comments are pretty good, or at least have the seed of something that you already realized. So I look for those, and look for those as confirmation of things that I was like, well, yeah, you know what, that character's motivations are actually pretty dinky, or you know, maybe this is a little ham-fisted. So yeah, I'll go through and sort of look at that and just kind of base what I'm rewriting off that. I'm actually going through a novella that I wrote now, and I didn't really know where to go with it. It felt like things weren't working, but I'm not very good at analyzing my own work and going through it. I kind of need someone to hold my hand through it. So I got some feedback from 2 people, one of which was Patty, actually, and a lot of those. Oh, and Liz, she didn't write it down, but she gave me the my girlfriend gave me the the talking spiel about what she didn't like about it, and what she did. And yeah, using that structure, I went through and went like, okay, cool. Well, this needs correcting. This needs correcting. I can probably leave this. It's probably good until this bit, and then this whole thing is a train wreck. But yeah, like most of those comments I'll at least consider. But yeah, I'm very happy to just go like, no, this isn't applicable to what I'm trying to do here. So I think feedback in that sense is very important, but I think it always needs to be filtered through, as you keep saying, Ali, personal taste. I think that's the through line from which it needs to be approached. Yeah.
This specific question's for Matan, because I feel like you might relate to this, Matan. But I'm kind of interested in the myth. I'm going to use J.K. Rowling as an example, but we get the famous stories of the author who writes the masterpiece, and then they're, you know, querying it around to publishers, and they get rejected 12 times, and we get to sit there in hindsight chuckling that it's like all these publishers missed out on the masterpiece. They just couldn't see it. Rather than the counter narrative of the author who goes, oh, I'm constantly being rejected, my stuff must be crap, I must take it back to the drawing board and reset it. Rather than I do like the shiny myth of JK being able to sit there being like, no, I already know it's genius, I just have to wait for the audience to be ready for my genius. So I wanted to throw it to you, Matan. If you found yourself in a place to query a place, I don't know, could you, how do you feel about that myth of the waiting for someone else to accept your perfection?
I think that's the $1,000,000 question. Is it me or is it you? And that's the big one, I think, as writers, because to be a writer in the first place, you gotta have some sort of irrational confidence that you have something interesting enough to say that people will pay for it. And even past that point, I think that it's always like, I've had rejections from agents. I had nice rejections. I had indifferent rejections. And you have that thought in your head, like, is this not the right agent, or is the book just not right? Another good case is Patrick Rothfuss, who comes up on occasion in our podcast. He dubbed himself the Prince of Rejections. His book took 14 years, but he'd been shopping it before. Brandon Sanderson, apparently the guy wrote, what, I want to say 12 books before he published one of them.
Yeah, but that's an afternoon for him.
Yeah, yeah, but the point is that he sold book number 5, I think it was Elantris.
Yeah.
So that means books 1 through 4 were not sold, and the guy kept chugging at it. So yeah, we could, I think the perfect spot to be is somewhere where you gotta have that anchor, like you said you had with Unsound, and you gotta know, you know, this is what my story is about, and I will die on that hill. But you also need to have that reasonable voice in your head, like Alex said. Most comments kind of confirm something you knew, like you knew the motivations were a bit dodgy or dinky or whatever you guys call it in Australia, and you just hope no one will notice. But once they notice it, you're like, okay, I gotta do something about it. So I didn't really give you an answer. I guess that well, if I knew.
Tell me a little bit about your own writing. Can you give me an example of when you've gone back for a hard rewrite?
Okay, so I wrote my first full novel in about 3 months. When I was 21, I just finished the military. I decided I want to be a writer full time. 3 months and was out. About 90,000 words. Then I came to Australia and I told myself, Mike, you're gonna sell it, and you know the path to superstardom is it's about to begin. And the next 2 years were just probably the most intense rewriting I've ever done. Just rewrote that book so many times, shopped it, and it was what, 70, 80,000, 90,000 words. It ended up being like 150,000 word monster.
Wow.
And most of these words did not exist in draft 1.
Wow.
It was like a complete Frankenstein's monster. There's no other way to describe it, but it was a learning process. So what I'll say to any listener who's really thinking, look, there is a timeline where you undertake this massive thing and it works out and it's the right thing to do. But just make sure it's not a personal tasting. Just make sure it's not just a specific reader not being the right reader, a specific publisher not realizing that Harry Potter is going to knock it out of the park. That's what I would say. Be sure.
There is I remember, was this I can't remember if it was you, Ellie, or Matan, that said this about like waiting. Oh, with the example of J.K. Rowling waiting for the, like, my book's good, like I know that, and I'm just waiting for the market to catch up. That's actually like, if you do have confidence in your taste, do stick to that. I don't know, like I'm just thinking right now, like I have agent representation for one of my children's book manuscripts, and we haven't found a publisher for it yet. But she specifically told me, I want to hang on to this one. I want to wait to see if the market turns around, because right now the market just happens to be cold in the type of story that is, but she still likes it and she wants to keep holding on to it. So I'm like, yeah, that's fine. It's also a great permission piece to be like, that one's frozen. I can't touch that manuscript.
It is nice.
Which is like if anything, like that's probably my favorite part of having representation for that one. I'm like, that one's locked under contract. I cannot touch that. And it's just, it frees up that mental space. But it's nice to know that it's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm happy with the shape of that story. It's one of my favorite children's books right now. And it's nice to have that confidence to be like, and I'm going to push other manuscripts to other agents, other publishers, and focus my energy elsewhere. That one's going to sit in the drawer and we'll see if the market comes around. And honestly, if it doesn't, I've had a lot of opportunities that came up because of that manuscript that I have gotten to drive with. But it's nice to be able to let it be there. Be like, yeah, we'll see what happens. I like it, though. I like the story how it is.
Yeah, no, that's really nice. I did want to draw attention to this contradiction that I feel is a contradiction in my own beliefs that I think's been warped by working in film. So I'd love for you guys to jump in and tell me I'm wrong. But it's this idea that I'm equating a finished product with it's been sold, or it's under contract, or it has that validation that is a monetary worth. The commercial market has told me when it's done, even though I'm justifying it to myself as, no, I'm going back and editing it because I want it to be the best version it can be. But then I think my subconscious thinking is it's the best version of itself when it's sold. So I wanted you guys to maybe come in on, I don't know, the dangers of a market-driven success win condition.
I don't have much to say. I just wanted to throw out Blade Runner as an example of something that had been done into a movie and was not deemed finished by the creator. Like, he literally did that movie 4 times after it went to the cinema. So for some people, that's not enough.
All I know is, for me, anytime I try to write something based on what I think the market would like, it always feels soulless. Like, I don't enjoy writing it all that much. It feels very mechanical, the whole process. It's like I can feel myself constructing the story beats. It feels very sterile.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know what has to happen. I know where it has to go. I can make a story like this. But it's not like, I don't know, it just feels deprived of, I guess, the spark that like genuine inspiration comes from. So those projects end up usually getting put down. And the ones that I drive that usually go to completion or more of a polished state are the ones that were like, I really wanted to, like, oh, isn't this a cool story? I just have a cool world in my head that I'm like, isn't this neat? Those are the ones that make it to the end.
Yeah, I think I'd say something similar, and that I think I probably write a lot of stuff that might not be in any way marketable, or might not necessarily be something that other people would enjoy reading. So it's when I get to a point where I feel like something's nearly finished, I'm like, oh, you know what? That actually might work, or that actually might be marketable. I'll just take that in a slightly different direction than a project that I'm nearly finished on, and I'm like, I know no one's ever going to read that. Just put that aside. That's too weird.
Are these usually short form experiments for you, James?
Yeah, usually. And I guess I get to about 70-80%, and I'm like, if I really, really like it, then I'll push through to the point where I feel it's completed. But often I'm like, I know that's never going to get picked up by anybody. It's too unusual. But sometimes I write something and I'm like, oh yeah, great little first act, second act, third act. That's got a feel of a story to it, and it's got a feel of, it's a bit of hope at the end. Cool. I'll turn that into a story.
Maybe this one's will be wider consumable.
Yeah, I'll make that consumable for human beings.
All right, yes.
I was just going to say, I don't think I've ever really written anything specifically to market, but I do try and write generally in the horror genre. So I guess those rails are there, fairly perennially and in some respect. But I look at that as more of a structure than like hey, is this commercially viable? Because typically horror is the least commercially viable fiction form from what I can see on mailing lists and things. But yeah, no, I don't know. I think I'd be open to it if someone's like, I need a zombie story right now, and I was like, I could probably whip something up for you, but I've never tried. So I don't know.
It reminds
Alex,
me.
that's what we need. We just need prompts. Just write me a book,
Yeah.
105,000 words. It has to have, this kind of. We'll do it.
Well, I'm actually thinking of doing something like that now for like a bunch of TikTok sketches, like just based on because The Last of Us is out. I was like, I wanted to do something with these characters for a while, just like little skits, and I'm like, but it just doesn't quite feel right in this context. But then I'm like, end of the world zombie apocalypse thing, make it sort of a parody. I don't know. So I'm thinking I might do something with that, which is, I guess, in a sense, running to market,
I was having a very interesting conversation the other day it was around that, say, getting a project to that 80% mark. So we're talking, if 100% is this bar we're holding it to as, an artistic output that we're proud of and is our vision we aim to achieve. Getting to 80%, you can do, relatively easily on your own. You can get it there. But it's the last 20% of a project that then is almost the equal amount of time. Like, it's in terms of ratios, you can do the first 80% quite easily. The last 20% is is going to take almost the same amount of time and effort, if not more. And it's this interesting idea that books, maybe someone's very first book, getting it out to a market, you have to push through that last 20 to get it to the 100%. But then once you're a famous author, you can settle for 80% thereafter, and that's often where you see the symptoms of in a trilogy, someone's first trilogy, maybe the first book's amazing, but book 2 and 3 just feel kind of average, is because by that point they've been able to settle for that 80% from themselves, from either the pressures, the timeline on it, but 80%'s been good enough thereafter, rather than pushing through that really murky 20%. And that's where I feel like I am when I hit these dramatic reset buttons, is because I've found 80%. I've been around 80% for a while, and I've just gone, well, no, I gotta crack it. I'm now in the arduous task of this. It almost equating it to a movie. I'm in the climax of the movie. It's the trials that I've got to overcome just to get to the final bit.
The all is lost moment.
As in the television show Lost?
No, it's from Save the Cat. All is lost moment is like where everything,
okay.
Rocky's wife leaves him,
I thought you were talking about the writers of Lost.
No.
And when you decide to write a complete manuscript again, yeah.
But I find it interesting that you say, the 80%, the 100%. I always felt like when we see the 100%, would we know it?
Yes.
I mean,
such a good question.
I'm not sure if I'm making up this anecdote or I heard it, but did someone ever say that the Mona Lisa was never really done? Like he never stopped touching it until he died or something? James, you nodding because you heard that too? Or am I just spouting fake news? I'm not sure.
It's kind of what I was going to say, that maybe there is no such thing as 100% with an artistic project. You just get up to, it's kind of like a black hole. The closer you get, the
when Phoenix's agent decides to sit on it, that's when you know. That's what you need it for.
You could be there.
That's where I was going with this. That I feel like the 100% almost, for me, it can't come from me. It has to come from someone else. Someone else has to read it and just really enjoy it. And at that point, I'll say, well, if I touch it, maybe I'll take away that enjoyment that reader has felt. So at that point, I think it's done.
I think for you, Matan, the 100% mark might be when someone comes and grabs you and physically pulls you away from
like restrains me and takes away access to my drive.
It's done. No, I want to get 3 more adjectives in.
I'm just going to the toilet, I swear.
No, but I do think it's a shifting goalpost for sure. But I think there's a lot of value in what you said there, Ali, about that last 20% being the hardest, and then knowing how far through that you have to persist, because that, the the sophomore slump or the late career sort of dip is definitely a thing. And it's something I think about all the time. I like probably way too much considering where I am in my career. But it's definitely a thing, you know, like there's a great quote about this from of all things, the lead guitarist of Tool. And he said, let me make sure I don't butcher it. He said, it's not good when it's done, it's done when it's good. And the problem is knowing what good is. And that's an almost indefinable thing to figure out. That's the really hard bit. So yeah, I do think external, you know, having someone say, no, this is fine, is probably helpful in that thing, especially if you're like nose pressed right up against the glass of the project for a really long time.
Oh yeah. I did want to wind up today's conversation with some examples of famous works out there that have gone through this, and potentially creators who have gone through this. It's really hard to get true anecdotes for this, so I'm defining it as the original creative team going through pressing the big reset button. So it was not finding examples of, say, movies where another creative, like another writer or ghostwriter, has been on to rewrite it. I'm not talking about those examples of rewrites, and I'm not thinking about times, you know, they improvised something on set and they changed it. No, I do want to dive into, the writers going through this struggle. And the best examples I found were 2 Disney movies, because they're quite well documented, the making of a lot of Disney processes. And for the most part, Disney's pretty good at, once they land on a creative team, they stick with that creative team. They don't do the thing of, we're just going to throw it to someone else to rewrite your script. They're actually really into, here's a feedback pool of 40 people who's going to tear your shit apart and you're going to do notes. So it's a crucible inside the Pixar Disney machine. I have Frozen here as an interesting example. It has its origins as originally calling it the Snow Queen, and one of their very, early ideas they wanted to do in 1936, as Disney himself wanting to adapt Hans Christian Andersen. But it was just a project that never quite got there, so it was shelved and put in the big vaults of the Disney backlot for many years. And then there's an interview with eventual screenwriter Jennifer Lee, who came onto it. And what year was this? Probably 2008, I believe, was around the time she was brought on to take a look at it. And she says, we had a very intense schedule. When I came on, we essentially started over, and we had 17 months. We were in place. A lot of choices had to be made fast. And the changes they made from the original version, so Elsa and Anna not originally being sisters, Olaf was more of a mean kind of character rather than the quirky modern Disney goofball character. Elsa, I think we've all heard, was just a straight out villain of the story. And then the entire ending itself was quite different. So that's where it started. And then over the course of 17 months, it became the Frozen we know. So that's a very rigorous turnaround in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, wow.
The story for us came together fairly late in February 2013. Its parts were good, but it wasn't adding up to the big movie that we envisioned. It was really between February and June that we put so much concentrated work into the story. We rewrote songs, we took out characters and changed everything, and suddenly the movie gelled. But that was close. In hindsight, piece of cake, but during, it was a big struggle.
Wow.
All the interviews I've heard of kind of the crucible that was the making of Frozen does sound very intense, and I do really relate. But I think it was one of the ones that, they were rewarded for it. Frozen was an out of nowhere hit and became one of their biggest money makers to date. They've announced a Frozen 3, all because of.
You could say that they looked at that first draft and they let it go.
Well,
sorry, I couldn't.
Yeah, no. Well, they had to, and I think one of the anecdotes I've also heard was it wasn't until they recorded that song with Idina Menzel that they were like, "That's not a villain story. What the fuck are we doing?" And that was a bit of a reset. Yeah, so she was meant to be the villain all the way up until that moment, and then I think they're like, that's the wrong path. That no longer feels right. After kind of hearing that song sung, then they're like, we need to reshape the story around who and what Elsa is and that emotional core. And, you know, kind of thank God they did, because then they created a modern anthem for that generation. Will, I don't know, what the Lion King means to us, I think, is what Frozen's going to mean to the generation just below us a little bit.
True. It's so crazy looking back on those things, because it's like, in retrospect, it feels so obvious. It's
you're
like, why would
right.
you even
Yeah.
need 17 months to write that story? But they're literally pulling it out of the ether. It's never existed. So they're literally, you're mining raw storyline and trying things out and seeing what fits and finding dynamics and all these things. When you're pulling it out of nothing, it's very impressive. And when you find it, it's like, yes, that's it. It's so obvious.
Yeah.
But when you're in it, it's not. So yeah.
And yeah, no, I hope I get to look back chuckling in 2 decades and be like, why did I ever write Cypress in third person? I was not on the right path there. That would be very nice to have that hindsight moment. And what else? What other examples? The Emperor's New Groove. Has anyone heard of this? It's kind of origin story.
Turns into a llama.
Yes, the llama one.
Oh, I love that movie.
So it has it famously has a hellish development kind of story. There's a documentary out there you can find online that Disney's tried to bury, because they don't actually want the behind the scenes of this movie like coming to light. But I think at some point Sting was involved in the music, and part of his contract was, no, I want to document the making of, because I'm Sting. So the only reason we have the behind the scene footage is because it was in Sting's contract and he was able to save it from Disney's delete button. I kind of love all that contractual nonsense. But we know it was originally meant to be a very typical Disney story, in that we had just had Lion King, The Little Mermaid. So we're talking that era of Disney, and they wanted to tell an Aztec story called Kingdom of the Sun. That was going to be this story of a prince who goes through hardship, turned into a llama, but then comes out and, you know, becomes the leader his kingdom needed him to be, which is not the story of the Emperor's New Groove. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not tonally where that ends up at all. And
it's such a weird movie. I love it, but it's so weird.
Yeah, it went through a very
the black sheep of that era, for sure.
It's
brilliant for it.
Go and look up the crucible of what it went through production wise, and that it was just a nightmare. I was constantly getting notes, wasn't coming together, and until they landed on this quirky tone and realized that it was a story that couldn't take itself too seriously to work. And then suddenly they had a success condition that they chased, and they just rewrote the whole thing off the back of that, to the point that the movie doesn't have a script. I love this anecdote so much that at the end of every Disney production, they're kind of like, can you please submit the formal final script for our records, for our archives? And the creators of The Emperor's New Groove are like, there is no script. We kind of improvised it in storyboards because we were just making it up as we went along. So they went back, and the formal archived version of the script is a transcription of the finished movie, because the finished movie came before a script. So that was the kind of nightmare that Crucible was.
Ali, how many screenwriters are listening to you right now and thinking, can I get away with that?
Oh, I super don't recommend that, especially in animation, where everything needs to be locked before you should spend that amount of money on animation. That's why it's just so astonishing that that's how The Emperor's New Groove came together. Storyboard first. The other examples I have that are well documented version, like this phenomena of just the author wanting to tinker with their own work and not being satisfied with the vision, is I've gone back to stories their books have been published, but the author has a couple of years later wanted to put out a new edition and bury the first edition. So that's a really clear pipeline of, there's no external pressure. No one's made them do this. This is the author's like, oh, it's not done. Take backsies. And the 3 examples I have of this is The Stand from Stephen King. There's 1 tick for the Stephen King counter. This is just stuff I was reading this morning. I don't know if feel free to expand, Alex, if you have more insight into this than me, but he had initially cut 400 pages from the first publication. 12 years later, he goes back and re-releases the novel called The Stand, the Complete and Uncut Edition, where he's restored that text. But not only does he restore, like, say, what he's been told to cut, he then changes the time period from the 1980s to the 1990s. So he does a rewrite where he's changed the decade, and then he's also put in pop culture references throughout the book. So that does feel like a changing of vision.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like the things that are added into it are really good too. Like I've read it through and then read him being like, yeah, and I put this in, and I'm like, that the trash can man bit, that's like the best bit of the whole book. So like he's put in sections that are just like, you can see why they're removed because they're not strictly like related to the thing, but like it just gives it that feel of like sprawling epic.
Yeah, right.
You know, that's what I sort of call it. But yeah, I didn't know about like the I had a feeling that it had been, you know, redone no, you can tell it was like redone in the 90s, but there are little inklings that you can be like, okay, there are a lot of references in here that seem a little, you know, but yeah.
He did something
fun thing to do to project.
He did something similar with the first Gunslinger book, where in the first act, the protagonist, someone uses a character important to the protagonist as a human shield. And in his early draft, the protagonist doesn't even hesitate. He just pops the human shield and then pops the person using them as a human shield. And then in later editions, he's changed the context of why he makes that decision to humanize the character a lot more. But it's a really different, like it's the kind of first act, you know, first time the character is in action, that scene where you say this is who the character is kind of thing. And he really changes the tone of who that character is based on just a single line of dialogue in between the character taking action. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting, because I came across it, I was like, I distinctly remember the character just cold-bloodedly precisely saying, no, you're in the way, bang. And then later on it's like changes it up, and I was like, okay, interesting.
This happened in Star Wars, that
the who shot
in the
first
original version, right? Who shot first? Han Solo shot first, I think, in the original one, and then they're like, no, Han Solo's a hero, he can't shoot first in a bar fight.
And I kind of love that example applies to this, I think, because that's not studio pressure and a director going back and being like, no, this is my vision the whole time, I finally get to do my uncut version. No, that was literally George being like, no, I'm still playing with the creative material and have changed my mind. It's a good example. Matan, feel free to jump into this one. You might know more about it than I do. The Hobbit. So Tolkien initially released The Hobbit. Let me just talk through what's in
37, 38. Yeah.
So as he was, I think he may have even been working on them a little bit simultaneously. Sorry. So rewinding before he releases The Hobbit, say The Hobbit's done and it's sitting in his drawer, and he's now tinkering away in what would become Lord of the Rings. And the importance of the ring is increasing, like becoming more and more dramatic in the plot. So he's, instead of adjusting what his new work is, he's going back and adjusting The Hobbit to match what the Lord of the Rings is becoming. And I think there is a 1937 publication of The Hobbit where
that's the original.
Gollum is less menacing, and so I'll just read this out. He's less menacing, and the prize, so in the Riddles in the Dark chapter, Bilbo and Gollum talking about the ring, the prize in the game of riddles Bilbo's survival rather than the ring itself. In the original version of The Hobbit, Gollum is quite happy to give away the ring when he loses the game. He's rather bummed that he can't give it to Bilbo because he's lost it. Bilbo has already found it. So he's gone away and tweaked the whole dynamic of this, the riddles moment, and what the ring is doing to Gollum.
But that's the thing. First of all, this is a really cool anecdote because most of us, having been born in the 80s and 90s,
and read that initial version.
We didn't read this, we read the new version. But I think it's really interesting because you said something. He did work on both of these projects kind of at the
I
same
think
time.
there was a little bit of an
He had
overlap.
this, he was
Yeah.
kind of world building in his, like in his
Yes.
free time. He was doing the language and the ancient world, the elder world. And then he did The Hobbit because, we discussed writing to market. His passion
Mm.
project was the elder world, was all the thing with the gods and the mythology he made. But the book that he could actually sell was the children's story, The Hobbit. And when he does write The Lord of the Rings, which by the way took him 12 years, so you bet there were a lot of rewrites there. That's kind of him going full circle
Whoa.
and writing, I guess, what he originally wanted to write, which is this
Yes.
epic tale.
The slow discovery. I think so. The thing that blew my mind was in that original publication, apparently the high elves were known as gnomes, and he's renamed them to high elves.
Get out, really?
His high
No
elves were
way.
called gnomes, and then he's like, I'm gonna that one's a little undercooked. I'm gonna call them high elves.
Legolas the gnome.
Can you imagine fantasy for decades to come if he hadn't made that creative choice? Just the domino effect that high elves aren't what we know high elves as. They are suddenly gnomes. Would
Was
be
his vision of high elves different, or was it just the name?
Yeah.
Elves were like
it's
for
written
Santa.
as renaming here, is what this says. I'll have to go back and try and dig
Okay.
out this original publication, because if they actually looked like garden gnomes, that is
That's
also
exactly
very
what I'm
different.
picturing them as now.
That's pretty
Rocking up
great.
to
Yeah.
like save the
I'll just
day
tell
at
you-
Hell's
Elrond
Deep with
just
the big red hats.
This is another interesting
Instead
one. I
of
know
bows
this
and
from
arrows, they
my,
just throw each other at enemies. It's very comical, very
just before I
slapstick.
move on from this, I love how this ends. So he's gone back and so he's released Lord of the Rings, and then he's been able to fix the discrepancy in The Hobbit now, where the ring is a bit more of a corrupting power. So he's done that. But then he's attempted to go back to The Hobbit once more. So after the Lord of the Rings has come a big hit, and actually, well, I know it takes a while, but say people have been receptive to his darker themes and the more serious tone of Lord of the Rings. He has the inspiration that he wants to go back and rewrite The Hobbit more in line with Lord of the Rings, these darker themes. And I love this quote right at the end where it says, he made it a few chapters in before everybody sensibly stopped him and told him he was ruining the original work. Those chapters have been published in a volume set called The History of the Hobbit. So you can find his attempt to rewrite The Hobbit in the darker theme before people, dragged him away from the keyboard or the typewriter and said, stop, leave The Hobbit, it's fine. You don't have to go away and readjust it. So I really relate hard to the impulse of poor Tolkien being like, it's not done. It's never done. It's not the vision.
Oh my gosh. That's actually, I wanted to say that back when we were talking about like the 80%, the 20%, I just wanted to say it's like, I feel like 100% for me exists, but it's a moving thing just based on who I am at the time.
Yes.
Like the book that is under contract, my agent's the one that actually gave me the last few notes that I changed in it before she took it on. And when between like with her notes, I actually felt like a drop-in sensation of like, whoa, that's done. That's what I want it to be. But like chances, like if I reread it now, I might have things the story might change a little bit, just as I'm a different person now from when I originally wrote it. So, it was 100%. Maybe it's, I don't know, just a different person.
That's almost the curse of taking so long with these projects is, who we are is changing, and even our craft skill is changing. So if I feel like I'm a better writer this month than I was last month, of course I want to go back and edit what I wrote last month.
And it's worth bearing in mind that there's always another project. That's always my go-to. It's like, if this is a 5-year process, it's almost like the length of time you need to invest into that will necessitate that you need to do it. But it's like, painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge. By the time you get to the end of it, you have to start repainting it because the skill set's change. So sometimes I think it's just like, maybe it's good to put this onto a different one and have that be a different era.
Were you going to say something, Matan? Did you have an anecdote? No.
No.
I thought I interrupted you before.
Just agreed. No.
I did have one final one that was Frankenstein. I didn't know this. It was apparently originally published anonymously in 1818 and then reprinted in 1823, Mary Shelley putting her name on it. But then there was another version in 1831, and the revised version that came out, Dr. Frankenstein retained a capacity. Oh, so in the original, a capacity for good and a certain control over his actions in whether to pursue his experiments. But in the 1831 version, leaves him caged to his fate by forces outside of his control. So there's the article went on to speculate. I didn't like it, but it went on to speculate that it's because she had like lost all the people in her life, and she was in that period between 23 and 31. Mary Shelley went through like a really crap time. So this article was speculating the reason she wanted to go back and make Victor Frankenstein, less in control of his own fate and more of this doomed poor creature himself was because of what was happening to her in real time. I'm not a big fan of that kind of speculation and reading into autobiographical details, but that is one potential reason why she changed her creative vision from sunny Victor making these choices to Victor not having any choices.
That was the original title of the book, Sunny Victor, and changed quite a bit.
It just makes me wonder, if some of the older stories we know had earlier drafts, like what if Oedipus was originally like this happy ghost story, and they figure it out. Just like all these stories, what if their original versions might have looked like?
I do find
Moby
that
Dick
kind of
draft
speculation
one.
about the Frankenstein story. That's sort of like a non-artist's way of trying to interpret artistic decisions. It's kind of like, oh, she's sad now. She gave it a sad spin. It's like not necessarily.
Maybe she just had a brainwave one night. She's like, shit, that would be so much better if I wrote it that way. And then she
might have just felt like, oh, this is more compelling.
Well, how much of our writing?
No, she got caught by the brain fever. Sorry, but
how much of our writing is going to be attributed to COVID? I mean, when they look back on this time, they're going to say like, "Ooh, they had a plague in their story." You know what that means?
Just funny because there's almost no references to COVID in any media material for the last 2 years. Almost
because
none.
we're still in denial.
If you look back
we're still in the denial phase.
Oh, we don't have a taste for it. Apparently something similar happened during like the Spanish flu. Like the artists at the time didn't reflect the Spanish flu in the art, kind of the immediately 5 or 10 years after it happened. It just not directly, no.
But I imagine that'd be
I think
something in there. There's probably a
I feel like The Last of Us is the first almost nod to the fact that a pandemic happened that I've seen in like popular media, where they have like they have the little things that I speculate are little winks, like when they're at Frank's house, they focus on Ellie specifically taking toilet paper, and like it opens with a person explaining what a pandemic is, where clearly the whole audience knows. The cop at one point, when they're like, when in the episode 1 when Joel's walking away, the Fedra person's like, stay safe, and he's like, yeah, you too. I'm like, oh man, everyone said that. Like that was what people signed off on emails with.
I was listening to their podcast, and they're saying that what their intention was with the introductory scene was to mention, oh yeah, viruses are bad, but funguses are worse. And they were saying they didn't want it to be all about COVID, or they didn't want to rely on people's experience with COVID. They wanted to kind of acknowledge this happened, but unfortunately, this will happen again, and it will be worse in the future, and this is how. So that was their kind of intention with that.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and like you were saying, if I end up like publishing a lot of work, I feel like people will look back at my work and be like, he must have been so affected by COVID, because everything he writes about is post-apocalyptic virus.
High school
and I'm
students.
Like, nah, I was doing this forever.
And on that note, Phoenix, do you have a quote for us to wrap us up today?
I do have a quote. Okay, and this is by the Oprah Winfrey. Step out of the history that is holding you back. Step into the new story you are willing to create. That's just good on so many levels.
Perfect.
Wise words of Oprah Winfrey. So thank you everyone so much for listening. We would love for you, if you've been enjoying the Pros and Cons podcast, to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. That helps other people find this podcast and discover it through algorithms. And if you would like to reach out to us for suggesting episode ideas or feedback, you can contact us via our website, which is www.precipicefiction.com, and there's a contact us button. We would love to hear from you, and thank you so much for listening. See you next week.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Nice and smooth.
Yeah.
That was
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.